The first time my sister ever asked me for help, she was 12 years old, sitting in a hospital bed with two legs that would never carry her weight again, asking me to reach the remote control because it had slid 3 inches out of her grasp. The last time she asked me for help, I was 300 miles away in a hotel conference room, and the only person close enough to reach that remote control was a man who told her it wasn't his problem. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern 22 years in the making, and it's the kind of pattern that doesn't stay quiet forever, not once somebody finally decides they're done pretending it's fine. 3 days after that phone call, that same man was standing on my porch, banging on my door, and by then there was nothing left for either of us to pretend about. Welcome to Beyond Family Lies. If you're new here, get comfortable, because this one is going to sit with you long after it's over. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. My name is Marcus Bennett. I'm 41 years old. I sell medical equipment for a living, which is a detail that's going to matter more than you think in about 10 minutes. I've spent the better part of 2 decades driving up and down I-75 selling hospital beds and mobility devices to clinics across 3 states, and somewhere in that same stretch of years, my little sister Grace learned how to live a full life from a wheelchair that insurance fought us 14 months to approve. Let me back up. Here's how it started. It was a Wednesday, March 4th, 8:52 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing in a Marriott conference room in Chicago, watching a slideshow about quarterly distribution numbers, the hotel's air conditioning rattling faintly overhead, when my phone buzzed against the table. Grace. I stepped into the hallway before I even answered. That's just instinct at this point. 22 years of instinct. Hey, Gracie. Marcus. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Grace doesn't do panic. Grace does calm the way other people do panic, quietly, efficiently, like she's already 3 steps ahead of the emergency. My chair died. The motor just cut out. I was halfway to the bathroom and it just stopped. I felt my stomach drop the way it always does, even after all these years. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. I'm stuck in the hallway of my apartment, but I'm fine. A pause. I have my doctor's appointment at 11, the vascular one. I can't miss this one. Marcus, they've been trying to get me in for 6 weeks. I looked at my watch. 8:54 a.m. My flight wasn't until Friday. 2 days away. I had 4 back-to-back client meetings that couldn't be rescheduled without costing the company a contract we'd been chasing since January. Okay, I said. Okay, think. I was already running through the list in my head. Uber wouldn't help. She needed the chair repaired, not a ride. A rental wheelchair wouldn't fit her setup, wouldn't have her custom pressure cushion, wouldn't work for more than a few hours before it did real damage to her skin. She needed her chair. Fixed. Today. Derek's home, I said. He's got the whole toolkit from Dad's shop. He fixed the armrest bracket last year in 20 minutes. Grace went quiet for a second. I already called him. Something in the way she said it made my chest tighten. And? He said he was in the middle of something. I told myself that was fine. Reasonable even. Derek works at Dad's hardware shop 6 days a week. The man is always in the middle of something. Call him back, I said. Tell him it's the whole chair, not the armrest. Tell him I asked. I called Derek myself 4 minutes later. It rang twice. Yeah. Derek, it's Marcus. Grace's chair died. The motor cut out completely. I need you to run over there with your tools and take a look before her doctor's appointment at 11. There was a pause on the line. Not the pause of someone thinking through logistics. The pause of someone who has already decided and is just working out how to say it without sounding like what it actually is. I can't. I can't today. Derek, this isn't a maybe. She's stuck in her hallway right now. I've got 3 jobs backed up at the shop and Dad's out sick. I'm covering the whole floor by myself. Another pause. Look, she's got other people. Call one of her friends. I felt my jaw tighten. She's got a brother who lives 8 minutes from her apartment and knows how to fix that exact chair because you've done it before. Marcus. His voice flattened out. Went cold in a way I'd never quite heard from him before. Not angry. Just done. That's not my problem to fix. I stood there in that hotel hallway with the phone against my ear, and for a second I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. Say that again? You heard me. I've got a business to run today. She'll figure it out. She always does. The line went dead. Not an argument, not a slammed phone. Just dead air. the way a door closes when someone's already made peace with what they're about to lose. I stood in that hallway for exactly 6 seconds. I know because I counted them without meaning to, the way you count things when your brain needs somewhere to put the anger, so it doesn't come out of your mouth all at once. Not busy, not overwhelmed, unwilling. There's a difference, and I've spent 22 years learning exactly where that line sits. Marcus? Priya, my regional manager, leaned out of the conference room door. We're 10 minutes from the mid-state walkthrough. You're on slide 4. I need 2 minutes, I said. She looked at me a second longer than she needed to. Everything okay? Working on it. I didn't explain further. She nodded and went back inside, and I stood in that hallway with a slideshow waiting behind one door, and my sister stranded 300 miles behind another, and there was never actually a decision to make. I just needed 30 more seconds to do something about it before I had to walk back in and pretend a contract mattered more than it did. It wasn't always like this with Derek. He used to drive 2 hours round trip every Sunday during Grace's first year of rehab just to help her practice transfers. Something had changed since then, and I didn't have time that morning to figure out when. I called Ray Odom next. Ray lives 2 streets down from Grace, in the same house he's lived in since 1987. 68 years old, retired machinist, spent 31 years at the same plant before it closed. He'd known our family since before I was born. He was the one who taught Dad how to rewire the shop's old compressor back when I was still in diapers, and he'd been at every one of Grace's birthdays since the accident, always sitting closest to the door in case she needed anything. He picked up on the first ring. Marcus, everything all right? Ray, I need a favor. Grace's chair died this morning, motor's completely out, and she's got a doctor's appointment at 11 she can't miss. I'm in Chicago for work. Any chance you could take a look? There was no pause at all, none. Give me 10 minutes to grab my kit. That's it. No conditions. No mention of what else he had going on that morning. Just 10 minutes. He called me back at 9:31 a.m. I'm at her place. Controller board's fried. Looks like a power surge got it. I've got a spare board in my garage from a project I never finished. Same voltage. Might work if I splice the connector right. Ray, you don't have to. Marcus, he said my name the way you say something you don't need to explain. I'll have her rolling in 40 minutes. He had her rolling in 38. Here's the part I only heard about later. In pieces. Because Grace isn't the type to make a production out of her own hard mornings. Ray got her into the chair at 9:44. She had 11 minutes to get across town to the vascular clinic on Ferry Street. A 15-minute drive on a good day. Ray didn't ask if she needed a ride. He just said, "Get your bag, I'll pull the van around," like it was already decided, because for Ray, it already was. They made it to the clinic at 10:58, 2 minutes to spare. The appointment itself mattered more than any of us said out loud at the time. Grace had been on a specialist's wait list for 6 weeks for a vascular consult, tied to circulation issues in her legs. The kind of thing that sounds minor, until a doctor uses the word concerning in the same sentence as would like to monitor closely. Dr. Patel, the vascular specialist, spent nearly 40 minutes with her, checking pulses, reviewing scans, asking questions about swelling and skin color, that Grace answered in the same flat, competent voice she uses for everything. At the end of it, Dr. Patel told her the numbers were stable. Not perfect, stable. Manageable with a medication adjustment and a follow-up in 8 weeks instead of 6 months. Grace told me later that the moment that actually got to her wasn't the diagnosis. It was Ray, sitting in the waiting room the entire 40 minutes, flipping through a golf magazine he had no interest in, waiting to drive her home. When she came out, he stood up before she'd even fully rolled through the doorway. "Well?" he asked. "Stable," she said. "Good. That was it. One word. Then you hungry? There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Does a decent grilled cheese." She told me that's when she almost cried in a hospital parking lot over a grilled cheese sandwich, because it wasn't about the sandwich. It was about a 68-year-old man who owed her nothing, treating a Wednesday morning crisis like it was simply what a Wednesday morning required of him. Grace called me from that diner at 12:14 p.m. Her voice had that same steady calm it always has, but there was something else in it too. "Ray got here in 10 minutes, she said. You believe that? 10 minutes. And he had a spare part in his garage like he'd been saving it for this exact morning. Then he sat through my whole appointment and took me for grilled cheese after. "That's Ray," I said, and I meant it as a compliment to him. It didn't feel like one about Derek. Marcus. Her voice shifted, just slightly. That thin, careful register she uses when she's about to say something she's been holding back. Derek said no before I even finished explaining what happened. I didn't say anything for a second. He said, and this is what I remember, word for word, he said, "That's not my problem to fix." Then he hung up. I felt something cold settle into my chest. The same thing I'd felt standing in that hotel hallway 40 minutes earlier. "I know," I said. He told me the same thing. Grace went quiet. Then, "I've never asked that man for a single thing in 22 years that he didn't make me feel like a burden for asking." I didn't have an answer for that, because it was true, and we both knew it, and some truths don't need a response. They just need to be said out loud, finally, by someone who's earned the right to say them. "You came, though," she added, quieter. "Well, you would have, if you'd been here." "I'd have been in that waiting room instead of Ray," I said. "That's the only difference." "I know," she said. "That's the part I keep sitting with." There was a pause on the line, plates clinking somewhere behind her at the diner. Ray's voice faint in the background asking the waitress for the check before she could reach for her own wallet. "He's already paying," Grace said, half laughing. "Didn't even ask me." If you've been with us a while, you know what comes next in these stories, but stick around, because this one has a turn coming that even I didn't see, and it's worth the whole 30 minutes. I flew home Friday afternoon, 2 days later than I wish I had been. I went straight to Grace's apartment before I even stopped by my own house. She was sitting at her kitchen table, chair humming along fine on Ray's spliced board, a crossword folded open in front of her that she wasn't actually working on. "You didn't have to come straight here," she said. "Yeah, I did." She looked at me for a long moment. "Dad knows." That stopped me. "Knows what?" "Everything," Ray told him. Apparently Ray's been Dad's friend longer than Derek's been his son, and Ray doesn't sit on things he thinks are wrong. I sat down across from her. "What did Dad say?" "Nothing to me yet." She turned the crossword page over, even though there was nothing on the back of it. Just something to do with her hands. "But he called Derek into the shop office this morning. 31 minutes, according to Denny. Denny worked the counter, had for 6 years, and told everybody everything eventually. Derek came out of that office and didn't say a word to anyone the rest of the day." Here's what I didn't know yet, sitting in that kitchen. My father had spent 35 years building Bennett Hardware and Repair from a single rented bay on Route 4 into the only full-service repair shop left in 3 counties. He'd told Derek, more than once, in more than one conversation over the last 6 years, that when he retired, the shop, the building, the equipment, the accounts, all of it, would go to Derek. Not split, not shared. Derek had worked there for 22 years to earn exactly that promise, and Dad had never once given him reason to doubt it. I also didn't know that 4 years earlier, quietly, without telling either of us, my father had opened a separate account, not connected to the shop, not connected to his will, in any way Derek would have thought to check, specifically earmarked for Grace. A little at a time, every month, meant to grow into something that would cover whatever her insurance never quite covered: equipment, repairs, the gaps nobody talks about until you're the one living inside them. That account existed because my father understood something the rest of us were only now catching up to. Some people show up, and some people wait to be asked twice, and the difference matters more than any of us want to admit until it's tested. Saturday morning, 9:14 a.m., my father called me. "Marcus, can you come by the shop? Just you." I found him in the back office, the same cramped room, with the same metal desk he'd had since 1979, papers stacked in the same careful, deliberate order they'd always been in. He looked older than I remembered from Christmas, not frail, just tired in a way that had nothing to do with his body. "Sit down," he said. I sat. "I talked to Ray yesterday," he said, "and I talked to your sister this morning." He folded his hands on the desk, asked her straight out if she wanted me to do anything about it. You know what she told me? "What?" She said, "Do whatever you think is right, Dad. I'm not asking for anything." Then she went quiet for a second and said, "But I'd be lying if I said it didn't mean something, him saying that." My father looked at his hands. "That's as close to asking as your sister has ever come for anything in her life." He looked up at me. "I want you to hear the rest of this from me before you hear it from your brother, because he's not going to tell it the way it happened. I waited. I called Derek into this office yesterday, he said. Sat him down right where you're sitting. He nodded at the chair like the room itself remembered it. I asked him one question. I asked him why, when his sister's chair died and she had a medical appointment, and his brother, who sells medical equipment for a living and knows exactly how serious that kind of thing can get, called him directly and asked for his help, why he said no. What did he say? Didn't answer right away, just sat there working his jaw like he was chewing on the words before he'd let them out. My father shook his head. Then he said he had jobs backed up, said Grace has other people she can call. I asked him straight out. I said, Derek, if it had been you stuck in that hallway, would 10 minutes have killed her to drive over? And he looked right at me, and he said, my father stopped, like the words cost him something to repeat. He said, it's not like anything actually happened to her. She's fine. That's the whole defense? That's the whole defense? My father's jaw tightened. I asked him one more time. I said, son, tell me I'm wrong about what I think this means. He just looked at his hands, didn't say a word. That silence told me everything the words didn't. I sat with that for a second. Not fine, lucky. There's a difference, and my brother had never learned it, or never cared to. That's not an answer, my father said quietly. That's an excuse looking for a place to stand. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for the moment that cost them nothing to prove they'd show up for the moments that cost them everything. My brother spent 22 years failing that test in small ways nobody wanted to notice, until one Wednesday morning made it impossible to look away from. My father didn't raise his voice once. He never does. That's not who he is. He just sat there behind that metal desk and told me, plainly, what he'd decided, and it took longer than I expected, because he wanted me to understand all of it, not just the outcome. I've been planning to hand this shop to Derek since he was 19 years old, he said. Told him so more times than I can count. Told your mother, God rest her, before she passed. It was always going to be his. I want you to understand that first, because what I did next isn't me pretending that promise never existed. It existed. He broke something I can't unspeak. Dad, let me finish. He looked at his hands. I called Diane yesterday afternoon. Diane Voss had been our family's attorney for 11 years, handled Dad's will, handled the shop's incorporation papers back in 2003. She came by the house at 6. We sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. I had her draw up new paperwork. It's done. Filed this morning at the county recorder's office, first thing, 9 a.m., before Derek even opened the shop. I felt my chest go still. He was quiet for a second, like he was picturing Ray in that hospital parking lot, waiting out an entire appointment for a woman who wasn't even his blood, over a grilled cheese sandwich that meant more than anything a filing cabinet could ever hold. Then he said it plainly. The shop stays in a trust now, he said. Diane called it irrevocable, made me repeat that word back to her twice so I'd understand it. You'll run the business side. Derek keeps his job, his salary, his benefits. That doesn't change. But the ownership he was counting on? He shook his head slowly. That goes into the trust permanently. A fixed 20% of the shop's net profits, every quarter, funds Grace's care for the rest of her life. Guaranteed. Not dependent on anyone's mood again. Is that even enforceable? I asked. Derek's put in 22 years, Dad. The shop's always been in my name only, my father said. Sole proprietorship, then an S-corp. Never his, no matter what I told him over the years. Verbal promises don't override a title deed. Diane made sure of that before I signed anything. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I'm not doing this to punish him, my father said, and the strange thing was, I believed him completely. There was no anger in his voice. Just the same steady, deliberate tone he'd used my entire life to explain why a bolt needed torque check twice. I'm doing it because I built this place so it would go somewhere that understood what it means to show up. He showed me exactly where he stands. I believed him. If this story is landing with you, do me a favor before we get to the ending, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment telling me what you'd have done in Marcus's position. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think, and I read every single one. Derek found out on Monday. Diane's office called him at 10:20 in the morning to schedule a signing appointment for the updated employment terms. The salary stayed the same, but now it came with paperwork acknowledging he held no ownership stake, present or future, in Bennett Hardware and Repair. According to Denny, who was standing at the counter when Derek took that call, my brother went pale, then asked to speak to Dad, and was told Dad was unavailable for the rest of the day. He wasn't unavailable. He was standing in the back office with me, going through invoices, perfectly calm. Derek called me 4 times that afternoon. I let all 4 go to voicemail, not out of strategy. I just didn't have anything to say to him yet that wouldn't come out wrong. Did he really think none of this would ever catch up to him? Tuesday, he called Grace. She told me later he opened with, "I heard what Dad did. I think it's insane, and I want you to talk him out of it." Not an apology, not one single word about the chair, the appointment, the 6 weeks she'd waited to see that vascular specialist. Just outrage that a decision had finally been made without his comfort in mind. Grace's response, she told me, was 4 words. "You had your chance." I thought sometimes about the 19-year-old Derek who used to drive 2 hours every Sunday to help Grace practice transfers, patient in a way I never had the temperament for, and I wondered what he'd say to that kid now, if the two of them ever met. Saturday morning, exactly 3 days after the paperwork was filed, I heard pounding on my front door at 8:40 a.m. Derek, still in yesterday's work shirt, like he hadn't slept. "You need to fix this," he said before I even had the door fully open. "Fix what, Derek?" "You know what? Dad's out of his mind. That shop was supposed to be mine. 22 years, Marcus. 22 years I gave that place. And you swoop in from Chicago for 2 days and suddenly I'm out?" I stood in my doorway and looked at my brother, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not even anger anymore, just clarity. "I didn't swoop in," I said. "I asked you for 10 minutes of your time on a Wednesday morning." That's the whole story, Derek. That's the entire thing that happened. It's a controller board, Marcus. She was fine. There it was again, the same 4 words. Not concern, not regret, just the same tired justification, worn smooth from repeating it to himself for 4 straight days. "She was stuck in a hallway," I said quietly, "on the day of an appointment she'd waited 6 weeks for, and you had the tools, the skill, and 8 minutes of driving between you and her, and you told her it wasn't your problem to fix. So this is my punishment? Losing everything I worked for?" "You didn't lose anything I took from you," I said. "You lost something you were never entitled to, just for showing up to a paycheck. Dad built that trust because you showed him, in one phone call, exactly what kind of owner you'd have been. Not a bad mechanic, a bad one to depend on. There's a difference, and it's the only one that ever mattered to him." Derek stood on my porch for a long moment, the anger draining slowly out of his shoulders into something that looked a lot more like fear. "She's my sister too," he said finally, quieter now. "I know," I said. "She always will be. That's not in question." "So what is the question?" His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and for a second, he sounded less like a man defending himself, and more like someone finally hearing his own excuse out loud for the first time. "Whether you'll ever be the kind of person she can call twice." He left without another word. I watched his truck pull out of the driveway, and I stood there in the cold morning air for a moment longer than I needed to. I called Grace before I'd even gone back inside. "He just left mine," I told her. "How'd he seem?" "Scared, mostly. Not sorry. Scared." I paused. "You all right?" "I'm always all right, Marcus." A small laugh, tired but real. "That's kind of the whole problem, isn't it?" I thought about my father's voice in that back office, steady and unbothered, saying, "I built this place so it would go somewhere that understood what it means to show up. Tools you never lend say more about you than the ones you do." I drove to Grace's apartment that afternoon. She was at her kitchen table again, chair humming fine, the same crossword from Friday finally filled in. "He came by," I told her. "I figured he would eventually." She didn't look up right away. "How'd it go?" "About how you'd expect." She nodded slowly, set her pen down, and looked at me with the same steady calm she'd had in that hallway on Wednesday morning, stuck and stranded and somehow still more composed than either of the men in her life had managed to be that day. "You know what I keep thinking about," she said. "Ray didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. And Derek's known me my whole life, has the exact same tools Ray does, and he hesitated for 0 seconds too, just in the other direction." "Yeah. Some people you don't have to wonder about," she said. You just find out, all at once, exactly who they've been the whole time. I sat with her a while longer that afternoon, not saying much, just being there, which is the only thing that was ever actually being asked of any of us in the first place. And somewhere in that quiet kitchen, watching my sister fill in the last few letters of a crossword she'd been carrying around for 3 days, I understood something I don't think I'll ever unlearn. It was never about the chair. It was never really about the tools, or the 10 minutes, or even the 300 miles between me and a hotel hallway in Chicago. It was about who answers the phone the first time, and who doesn't answer it at all. A few weeks later, the first distribution from the trust came through, quiet and uneventful, just a letter and a transfer, the way Diane said it would be. It covered a new pressure relief cushion for Grace's chair, the kind her insurance had denied twice. She sent me a photo of the box, no caption. She didn't need one. Derek still works the floor, quieter now, head down. He hasn't called Grace again. She hasn't called him either. If this one hit home for you, let us know in the comments, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.